All right, go ahead.
Before we begin anything, I want to take a look at a couple of parts. There's some issues when it comes to string writing, and I want to fix it for you guys with whims. For example, at letter A, the people are playing violin 2 and viola. You have a lot of repeated 16th notes. If you guys want to take those as eighth notes, that is perfectly fine. Just play every other note. That happens again in the violas at measure 44, where you have those slurs. Again, if you want to take those as eighth notes and divide it, that is perfectly fine. Another thing is when you see those little downward staple-looking things like the very first measure up on the note, that's supposed to be a down bow if you haven't taken string methods. Just play those kind of like a staccato because double downs pretty much implies that there's a space. So play it like a heavy staccato and that should be fine. Anything else I'll get to when we get there? All right, let's begin.
Can I say one other thing? At letter A or anywhere in here, if you have those 16th notes and playing that quickly is not conducive to the instruments you play, you can always make them super short eighth notes and just play 1 and 2 and. Okay, great. Sorry.
Which reminds me, if you have a pizzicato, a P-I-Z-Z above a note, just play it really short. That'll get the same effect. Just a really short note. All right, I'm going to take this a little slower than it's supposed to be, so let's go from there. Right at the beginning. 9, which is where everybody that isn't a first violin has the very interesting rhythms. You guys played them really well, but I want to rehearse them just so we know what we're doing. It's a hemiola, so it's basically the same distance between the notes, but just not on my feet. So I want you guys to sizzle with me, and I'll do it too. Right at measure 9, where the violas, violin 2s, and cellos come in with the pizzicato line. All right. So right at measure 9, sizzle with me. 1, 2. All right, let's do it one more time just to make sure we have had it. There's a little bit of scatter, but it's sounding good so far. So let's do that one more time, and then we'll put the notes to it. Sounds good? All right. 1, 2. All right. So now let's just get everyone that isn't a first violin on that same exact spot, measure 9. You all know where we are? Awesome. All right. With your instrument this time. 1, 2. All right, that sounds good. Now let's add the first violin to start right back at the beginning. I think the beginning should be fine. Just make sure you watch your dynamics. All right, and I noticed nobody was really looking up at all, so let's try to keep contact. I was trying to do some dynamic changes, but nobody really saw that. So
that's never going to happen on the first read-through.
Yeah, I know. So
never going to happen.
It's so let's try to follow the dynamics as well this time. All right, so right at the beginning. measure 62, which is the measure after C, I'm going to go into a bit of a macro pulse. Basically, I'm taking it in 2, where each beat is a whole measure. I feel it divides the phrasing a little better. So let's get into that section by going at measure 56, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before C. It's the measure before, or when everybody has the 3 notes and then a 8th rest. All right. So measure 56. 1, 2. That transition one more time. I may have gotten off, so I apologize for that. Let's do that transition one more time, and try to keep that pulse in your head, the quarter note pulse when you get there. Alright, so let's try this one more time. Actually, let's leave the first violins out and just hear the harmonic context behind it. Alright? So let's get it right at C. 1, 2. Let's look at the violin 2 line. You have some nice dotted 8th note, 16th note lines. So let's just hear the violin 2s, which would be at least on the clarinets, right? Let's hear that right at measure C. We'll just go for a couple measures just so we know have that rhythm, all right? Just you guys. At measure C, letter C. So we can keep that pulse. All right? Letter C. 1, 2. All right. So that line will need a little bit of rehearsal later on. So let's move on. Let's go back with everybody back to 56, which is 5 before C, so we can get back into that section. I'm going to stay in 2, so just try to keep the longer phrase alive, but I'm going to stay in 2 to keep the tempo. All right, so 5 before C at 56. 1. stopping at F. So I want to do the transition into F and just play the very first note of F. That list that's sounded section sounded great, by the way. That sounded really good. Let's start at 1, 2, 3, 4 before E. It's where the dotted 8/16 comes back, and it starts to build again. And when we get to E, make that a sudden change, so that we get a dramatic change from how we had it before. So let's start at 4 before E. All right. 1, 2. Alright. It sounded really good.
And James, you are out of time.
Okay.
All right, it's good. Yay, James. That was underwhelming, everyone. Yay, James! So, James, how did you feel like it went?
I feel like I tried to cram a lot into it. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe I could focus more on a little more on less sections as much as put more sections into the time I had.
I like it. Okay, good. So what else? What else was your, I mean, kind of just in reflecting, is there anything you would do differently?
I probably wouldn't have gone into a macro pulse at C.
I am so glad.
Yeah.
I think
It was
eventually,
an idea I wanted to try, and it didn't work out, so I decided against it.
I think eventually that's great. And I think you can even tell them in the first rehearsal. Eventually, we're going to be in a macro pulse here, but for today, as we're kind of getting to know the piece, and I always spend the first couple weeks, like if you're in a school and you're teaching every day, the first couple weeks doing it just in the normal quarter note pulse, and then as they really get good with that, then you can kind of jump into a macro pulse. Good. Okay, what else?
I feel like because of the level everybody's at, the section right at the beginning with all the offbeats took much less rehearsal than it normally would have.
Mm-hmm. Did they ever get it, though?
They got it about half the time, I think.
They didn't get it. They never once had it,
Okay.
all the way through. They did when they were sizzling,
Yeah.
but when they played it, it never was completely right. And so I think you do need to call them on it. I mean, you don't have to be mean about it, but you can say, hey guys, we're still stepping in those cracks. Make sure that you're counting really carefully, blah, blah, blah. Let's try it again. But I thought the way you approached it was really good with the sizzling. All right, what comments do you have for James, everyone? Angela.
I really liked that at the beginning you clarified all the different stuff for the wind players. I thought that was really, it showed how prepared you were, and that was really good and helpful.
Absolutely. Good. What else?
I felt like, I didn't think you were prepared, but I felt like a lot of times, like whenever we were doing the, like offbeats and work at the beginning, like you would work with us on something, and then we wouldn't quite get it right, and then you just move on.
Yeah.
Like, well, you'll get it, and then just move on.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying about how I tried to pack too much into the 10 minutes, where I should have just spent more time on perfecting something smaller.
Right. Good. What else, guys? Ensemble.
When you go into a macro pulse, make sure you're really subdividing in your head.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems that we had with the macro pulse is that it was a different pulse than what we were just doing.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that macro pulse is there is really no underlying ostinato like to keep it driving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be at a point in the rehearsal process where they are really grooving on that half note pulse before you can kind of jump into giving them just the half note pulse. Because the only thing that's the ostinato or any sort of like moving line is in the first violin, right? So I mean, if they do their part really well, that's great, but nobody else is doing that same thing. So it's just really hard to do that.
Yeah.
Good, what else?
You were very clear with everything that you wanted, so even if it didn't happen, it was still in those things where I could read and like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be.
Good. Mara?
Since this is a string piece, the one setting you didn't talk to was the strings. Like I have chords, I don't know if they're DVC, non-DVC. You could have talked about some bowing. I think you had a great idea of the piece, but there were some points that could have been clarified for the string players.
I actually wrote that down, but you didn't read it.
Okay, good. Good comments, guys. Anybody else? All right, so I've got a couple things for you, James. You told them it sounds great a lot. Did you guys notice that? In reality, they didn't sound great. I think you're being really nice to them. And you can say, well, it's a start. Let's try that spot again and see if we can do this, this, and this, and then do it again. And if you kind of fib to an ensemble and tell them they sound great, they're going to stop believing you. You know, because everything sounds great. You know, so what's the impetus, or what gives them the idea that they need to work harder? There's no reason for them to work harder if you think it sounds great already. So you have to be kind of the taskmaster to say, well, we're not quite there yet. It's getting better. Each time you do it, it's a little bit better. And you can even say, we still need to work more on this. Let's go on for now. I don't want to get hung up on this right now. We'll come back to this at some point. Just be careful of telling them, you sound great, when they really don't. Okay, and you'll hear on the video, if you're listening in front and you think they sound great, you're probably thinking a lot about what you're doing and not really listening to them. I think you'll hear on the tape that there were times when you told them they sounded great where they really didn't. Okay, let's see, I have another comment for you. I don't remember what it was. Does anybody have anything else, James?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, for this process, are we expected, because James had a lot to do, and he tried to get to F, but he had things to work on.
Mhm.
Should we not worry about getting to F as much if there is stuff to work on?
I think in most cases the excerpt is short enough, especially for the wind players, where there's enough people playing their normal parts, you'll be able to get from beginning to the end of your chunk. I think what made it hard in this case is that people are playing your parts that they're not used to playing. And it would have probably fallen apart, and it did a couple times. So that's why James had to stop. But ultimately, I would like for you to get to F, although I understand why James couldn't necessarily do that today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, James, really good start. Good start. Watch the video and answer those questions. I think you'll learn a lot from it.